This week, we have looked at arguably the most dedicated anti-slavery campaigner of her era, Abby Kelly Foster. Like the other women we've studied so far, she did not let the pressures of her domestic life interfere with her sense of mission. She said of her marriage that both of us are willing to lay house and friends all on the altar of that great principle which lies at the foundation of the world's renovation. And although this single-mindedness won her many admirers, she was also much disliked by many others. Perhaps more than Fry and Grimke, Kelly was the one who was most interested in tactics and strategy rather than spiritual or philosophical ideas and principles, and even though her response to slavery was an emotional one, she might best be understood as being the most political of the three. As we move away from prison reform and anti-slavery and closer to the women's suffrage movement of the 20th century, it might be worth reflecting on these two areas of work and how they still influence modern political thinking. Friends may be interested to learn about the work of civil rights lawyer Bryan Stevenson, who's based in Montgomery in Alabama, and he runs an organisation called Equal Justice International, which guarantees legal representation to every inmate on the state's death row, employing 17 full-time attorneys and 12 young lawyers who work with them for 2 years each. He claims there is a direct line from slavery to the treatment of black suspects today, and that we need to acknowledge this shamefulness of that history. He has published a memoir entitled Just Mercy, A Story of Justice and Redemption, and he claims there is still incredible overlap between places that had lynching and places that continue to use the death penalty. He is establishing a memorial in Montgomery to all lynching which he can document, and he's hoping that memorials can be established throughout the US and in all places where lynching took place. His work confirms the importance of studying and shedding light on the history of slavery and of anti-slavery work to help deal with current prejudice and discrimination. I'll put a link to his TED Talk on this work. You may wish to listen to the recording of today's Women's Hour on BBC Radio 4, which featured someone from the Prison Reform Trust speaking about the unnecessary increase in the imprisonment of women on very short sentences for minor and non-violent crimes, and how this has led to major disruption for those women's families. Their imprisonments were caused by technicalities from recent legislation, which the woman would not be skilled to deal with, and there are consequences of the privatisation and fragmentation of the probation service. She said that the story was the same for men, but they wanted to begin with improving the situation for women and then copy those reforms for the men. The interview, which is available on the podcast, was very much in the footsteps of Elizabeth Fry. The next section that we'll look at is like a patchwork sampler covering different aspects of women's lives in the 1800s. What was it like for women, and what were some of the problems and issues for women at that time, particularly in Britain and Ireland? And what were Quaker women doing in Britain and Ireland at that time? As always, Juliana and I look forward to reading your comments on the weekly forum.